Welcome to the Savvy Dentist Podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hi everyone, Jesse Green here. Welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and to the Savvy Dentist Podcast, the show where great dentistry meets great business. My guest today is Jason Pilgrim. I've known Jason for a couple of years now, and he's an exquisitely good entrepreneur. By profession, he's an exercise physiologist, but he's owned and operated many different healthcare clinics. He's been able to scale them, and he operates businesses in other industries as well. Jason is the entrepreneur's entrepreneur. What's really interesting, though, and what I didn't know, was how his life nearly ended at the young age of 24 because he'd built a business that required him to be there all day, every day. And this story that we're going to be talking about today is how he changed his business from being totally reliant upon him to creating the scaled enterprise that he now enjoys. It's a wide-ranging interview, and we cover a heap of territory, and Jason's really generous with his knowledge. So, as always, do have a pen and paper handy because there's heaps of gold coming out of this conversation. Now, for those of you who don't know, we are running the Scaling Summit in September this year. It's September 4 and 5 in Brisbane, and it's about the same journey. It's about how to take your business from something that's reliant upon you, the key person dependent, creating a truly leveraged, a truly scaled business that gives you more money, more time, and more meaning. And you can find tickets and details about that event at scalingsummit.com. So head across there if you want to find out more. Grab a ticket. We'd love to see you there. We've got some amazing speakers there. Steve Waugh, Glenn Carlson, Nov Kashyap, to name a few. And it's going to be a cracking event, and we can't wait to see you there. But for now, let's get on to our conversation with Jason Pilgrim. Here he is. Jason Pilgrim, welcome to the Savvy Dentist Podcast, my friend. It is an absolute delight and pleasure to have you. How are you today, mate?
Mate, I'm absolutely fantastic. Thanks for the invite. Very warm here in Sydney and, sweating up a storm.
Same here in Canberra. It is. I can feel the sweat in my toes, which is really rather disgusting now that I've said it out loud. But there you have it, folks. Well,
you could have said it in your underpants and that would have been worse.
Yeah. Hey, we're off to a good start. Got weird really fast.
Viewership's gone down and I don't understand, Jesse.
I don't understand. Hey, mate, you've got a really interesting background. Obviously, your professional background is as a physiotherapist, but you've got a really unique and interesting business background, and we've met at various functions, and we live in the coaching, mentoring space, but you've got businesses outside that as well. For the audience benefit, could you just give everyone a bit of an overview of your backstory? Because I'm always really interested in life's journey that people go through and what decisions they've taken and why they did things and how they ended up at this point. So could you just give the audience a bit of an overview of the life and times of Jason Pilgrim?
Absolutely, mate. I feel like it's Mike Munro doing This Is Your Life now. But
we're going to bring out your ex-girlfriend in a minute.
Yeah. That's going to be awkward for my wife if she listens to this. Yeah, look, my background is I'm an exercise physiologist by trade, allied health, jumped out of uni and was headhunted by a couple of health teams in Sydney that didn't have team members out west, so I'm at the base of the Blue Mountains. And decided that, it sort of fell into business of being a sole trader. And before I knew it, I was running around 1,000 different places and working way too many hours. I won't go into the details of this side of it, but I was doing about 90 hours a week, which is pretty crazy when you do the breakdown of how that works.
Wow.
Starting at 6 or 7 in the morning, finish 8 or 9 o'clock at night. Long days, Saturdays, trying to work on the business at midnight, trying to work on the business and do systems and templates on Sundays for a few hours. And it's not sustainable. So, yeah, you can make some good money doing that, but it's not sustainable. And I basically had a young person stroke. They thought I was having a brain hemorrhage, sort of got read your last rites type of thing. Somehow I came through the other side, and here I am today. And so that was probably the catalyst that made me stop and go, I need to make a change. Yeah, money's can be a good thing, and it can do a lot of things, right? And can set you up, but it can also take you down a slippery slope and a big spiral that takes away everything. And I was very, very fortunate to learn the lesson without paying the ultimate price. And as a net result, I went ahead and I got married. I've got 3 beautiful daughters now. And I sort of fell into the business coaching side of things as well after a few more years. Started a corporate health company working with some big multinationals. started bringing in products that are fairly high turnover products for the allied health industry. We started a cosmetic injecting company that's got 46 franchisees around Australia, and we're now going global with that into Canada, etc. Sort of had a couple of colleagues 6 or 7 years ago now say, hey, can you come to Melbourne and help us do what you know, for our business, what you've done for yours? And didn't really know what that meant, but it pretty much meant, hey, we'll fly you down, come and help us do all this, and we'll pay you to do it. And I'm like, oh, that sounds all right. And then guys in Brisbane wanted to do it. And then before I knew it, I was running a business coaching program for allied health professionals and running conferences and started doing keynote presentations for universities and all sorts of stuff. And then the last couple of years, I've been really stepping out into that realm and doing some really amazing things, to be totally honest. Doing a lot of, sort of banking, financing in America. And we've got a travel company that we've just released. And I was in Japan and Thailand and that last year and the year before, doing a lot of business development and presenting and things like that. So it's been a very, looking back at a time like this, a very unique journey, I think. It's been a lot of fun times, a vast amount of experience across in a lot of different industries. And, hey, mate, it's been a good journey so far, but hopefully it's just the tip of the iceberg. So,
well, I want to ask you, mate, when you had that young person's stroke, how old were you when that happened?
24.
Wow. Okay.
So, yeah, basically the surgeon, when it happened, the specialist, I was doing work with the Penrith Panthers rugby league team, and that was the doctor that was the sports doctor for Penrith Panthers. And Norm just said we had a very good relationship with him. And it was literally, it's almost like a Hollywood movie, with the lights going over and you're on the bed, and sort of realised something's not right. And a lot of before that is a bit of a blur, and I don't really know a lot of stuff around that time. I remember saying, hey, Norm, what's actually going on? I did actually drop the F-bomb in there, which I won't hear, like what is going on. And he just sort of tapped me on the arm and he said, we don't know, Jace, we're trying to find out. And I remember that didn't sound too good. And I remember asking him again, what is going on? And they stopped pushing me and said, I've just spoken to your wife. Well, she was my fiance at the time. We weren't married, but he said, we've spoken to your wife. She's left school. She's a school teacher. So left school. She's 20 minutes away. She's just picked up your mother. But I've got to ask you as a friend and as a colleague, is there anything you want me to pass on to your family and friends?
Oh, jeez.
And it was that were the exact words. And that was the exact moment that my blood ran cold. And I really, even though I had no context of what was happening, I knew that there's no way that sounds good to anyone at any time, in any part of life.
No.
And as a net result, I don't think I really answered or did anything. And he repeated it. And he said again, I need to know, is there anything you want me to pass on to your family or friends? We think you're having a brain hemorrhage, and if you are, you don't have 20 minutes to live. And I'm like, So that's when my life changed, mate.
Yeah, wow. I can see that's bringing up a lot of emotion for you, mate, and I totally get it. Yeah,
it's one of those ones I still get, my blood runs cold. I get the prickles up my arm and that type of stuff when I think about it, because I don't talk about it much. It's not that I'm not proud of it, but because I'm not proud of it by any stretch of imagination, but it's not really something you talk about, I guess.
Yeah.
But then there's times like this where you sort of go, hey, you know what, it's a really good grounding moment, I think, to make you understand and pull you back into the reality of the right ways to do things. And I always try and say there's not the right ways and wrong ways, but I think in this situation it is the wrong way.
Yeah, totally. So I guess, having been through that, mate, and obviously that's a massively sobering experience, and I can only imagine what that must have been like for you, your family, obviously. But obviously sometimes we've got to look for the good in things. You're still here, which is great.
Yeah.
What good came of it for you?
Oh, a hell of a lot, to be totally honest. I think, used to have stroke clients and things like that as well. So I think there was a different appreciation and understanding in regards to neglect, like right side neglect and that type of stuff. I had no long-term implications of those things. I think in some respects it probably gave me a really good insight into what different, heavy chronic diseases can actually do to people, and the psychological componentry that comes with that. Because there was a lot of changes that had to happen. I made massive changes very quickly to my diet, to my lifestyle, to my sleep, to my exercise. And, I was a guy before that was, I came up in the swimming world. So I was in, New South Wales teams for years. I was in the Australian squad for 3 years, went to Junior Olympics. I moved out into doing triathlon and things like that, and a couple of Ironman triathlons. So I'd been super fit and probably crazy half my life with those things. And then I just turned obsessed into the work environment and building my business. And like I said, making some damn good money, but at the expense of nearly my life. So there was a lot of lessons about, time and task management and, priorities in life, and money isn't everything, and having that freedom to spend more time with family and friends, and working the diary to make sure that the business works for me, not just for clients. And it really was the kick in the backside that I needed to start to understand there's a lot of things in life that, and business probably more so, that you don't know. We don't know that we don't know it until something comes along and makes us pay a good little price. And in this situation, it really made me pay the ultimate price. So that literally was the catalyst for me to be able to go out and start asking questions, reading books, turning to colleagues, turning to, getting myself my first coach and mentor and all these type of things moving forward. That was, so there's massive amounts of lessons and flow on and that type of stuff, but that was literally the catalyst that allowed me to do that.
All right, so there's a lot of threads there I'd like to pick up and run with, mate, because you've given me quite a few good segue opportunities, so I'm gonna shamelessly run with them.
Go ahead, mate. Go ahead.
So, okay, we've spoken about the fact that you're working 80, 90 hours a week, the huge impact that had on your health, and then of course the revelation that you need to do things differently. What I'd like to ask you is some of the practicalities of how you made that change. And the reason I want to ask that is because I guarantee you there's someone on the way to work right now listening to this podcast who feels like they're, working in crazy hours, doing too much, knows that there's got to be a better way, but don't quite know how to figure it out. And so, obviously you've spoken a little bit about writing templates and systems and getting some leverage there. What was the first thing you did when you went back to work to start creating some time and space for yourself?
I think probably the first thing was probably just identifying the priorities of what I should be doing and what I shouldn't be doing. And then making massive changes to, my sort of diary, my default diary. It used to be just a matter of, that needs to be done, I'll get it done. That gets done, I'll get it done. I'd see clients during the day and I wouldn't get notes done in bits and pieces. And it's probably no different to a lot of the clients that you work with in dentistry as well, Jet, and then they get home and they run in the door and they're already, dinner's half cold because their kids are there waiting and they're still running late, or traffic or trains are running late. And then before you know it, they need to write notes, or then they need to get back to the emails. And so many health professionals, medical professionals are in that exact situation. And I was no different. And we started to have to actually understand, well, hang on a sec, we need to get those things in check really quickly. So we changed around my diary. We made sure that I had time during the day to get notes done and to get letters done. I put a thing called chaos time onto my diary.
Yep.
And, most people go, what? And it's like, well, every day something's going to go wrong, or there'll be a little fire that needs to be put out as such. And it becomes that scenario that you need to be able to have, right, I'm not going to panic. Things are just going to happen. And, while I'm with my clients, you don't need to interrupt me because I've got chaos time on the diary in an hour and a quarter, and I'll put the fire out then. And so sort of scheduling into the diary that 15-minute block or half an hour block when I'm going to panic and get everything done type of scenario shows that you can be very, very efficient and effective in small snippets of time. But it also means that you get to the end of the day and so much of the workload that would take you 2 hours or 3 hours at home gets done in a 45-minute period during work.
It's
ironic,
isn't it?
Back to uni and I go, you're given 12 weeks or something to do on a uni assignment and you've started 3 days before it's due and you pull an all-nighter.
Yeah.
And we all get it done and go, oh, we're amazing. And I think just understanding that we can be very efficient and effective when we're under time pressures or with a gun to our head. So why don't we just make those things happen? And it became it had to be the self-discipline side of the business owner that I think most of us in the health and medical industry are not good at. And that self-discipline thing was something I was very disciplined in my swimming years and my triathlon to, turn up at certain times, get out of bed, listen to the alarm clocks, do this, listen to my coaches, etc. And then we get into the business world and we just float along. Totally. And it's like, well, if you don't have a coach and you don't have a mentor and you don't have the accountability in place, it's all on self-discipline. And I think most of us are just innately wired to not just be absolutely brutal with our own time. And we turn the shotgun on ourselves, not onto other people, and we take that hit ourselves.
Yeah. Look, mate, I think that's a really interesting point, and I just wanted to ask you, why is it that you think most health professionals, whether they're dentists, whether they're, physios, exercise physiologists, podiatrists, whoever, right? Most health professionals I know put themselves second. And, the whole concept of putting your own oxygen mask on first springs to mind. So why is it you think that as health professionals we tend to not put our own health and well-being front and center?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jesse. I think we're a unique group of individuals. Like we come into this industry because we genuinely care. We have compassion. We want to change lives. We want to help people. A lot of us have had sporting backgrounds and we're quite competitive as well. And so I think we always want to try and do things ourselves. We always want to be able to sort of prove to ourselves or someone else that we can do it or we don't need help. And I think there's a lot of pride and ego in that.
Mm.
And, as the song goes, ego is a dirty word. Well, some of the time it can be great and it can drive you on to doing some amazing avenues. But I think sometimes we're just from the background where you have to do it yourself. If you've got to do the extra 10%, you got to work 110% yourself. You're the person that's out there kicking the extra 10 goals at the end of a footy practice. So you're the one that does the extra 20 laps or like I think about Kieran Perkins. He used to always finish his training sessions, everyone would be finished, and he'd go and do another 20, 50-metre lap, so another kilometre with his kickboard, a freestyle kick, and he'd be doing them on the 35-second turnaround, which for most people can't even think to swim a lap of the pool in 35 seconds, let alone just do kick.
Yeah.
But he did that because he wanted to do that and drove himself that extra kilometre of kick every day, and he just became that guy that could back end his 1,500 metre and come home with the extra kick that would win him all those gold medals and world records, etc. So I think I think it becomes a scenario where we've always been attuned to going the extra mile and being dedicated to it, that we then turn into, well, it has to get done, so I'm just going to do it myself. And I think that's a little bit of ego as well, like we want to be able to prove that we can run a good business. We want to prove that we can do this. It feels good when we're actually really busy and the diaries are full and we've got waiting lists and people can't get in to see you for days or weeks, and it feels good, and that the numbers look good. And I think there's a little bit of that involved, to be totally honest. And not that it's a bad thing, because, hey, it drives a lot of people to move forward and change a lot of lives and have a lot of impact. But I think that's at the detriment of ourselves as individuals.
Yeah.
When you put that into that caring nature of, we're wanting to help people out. I know that we've spoken about it at length before, Jesse. You've got a lot of clients and colleagues that love the art of dentistry and they love what they actually do, which is great.
Yep.
It means that they don't have to be a business owner that never gets on the tools, right? They don't have to be that business owner, but we've got to get that right balance. And I think that some of the time maybe they do a little bit more of the dentistry, but we get the other side of the business organised so it doesn't have to be them as well. And that's not something they should look as, they can't do it. Absolutely they can, but they shouldn't have to.
Yeah.
I think that's a little bit of our ego sometimes, that we feel like we don't ask for help, or it's a sign of weakness to ask for help. And reflecting on what I was saying before, I think that was probably a big challenge with myself. I was quite overconfident, a little bit arrogant in many, I know it's hard to say that, but I think I came out of the swimming world very, very arrogant, because I knew I was at the top of the game. And I wasn't the Olympic champion, but I was well and truly up there. And
you hold your own.
Absolutely. And you get a little bit arrogant at those type of things. So I think if you've come out of a pretty good sporting background, which a lot of people have particularly in the, exercise and sports science, the physio, EP, podiatry type realm, then I think that we're innately wired to be the best, want to be the best, show that we can do this, do more, blah, blah, blah. And I know for myself, definitely, and a lot of colleagues and clients, we probably not take it to the grave, but we do take that a little bit too seriously. And as a net result, push ourselves, do too much, work too many hours, and we suffer personally as a result. And I think that just comes down to a little bit of the ego check, that we need to just say, hey, you know what, putting your hand up and asking for help, or looking for people that can do certain parts of your job role better than yourself, is actually the smartest move, and it's not a sign of weakness.
No, totally. All you've got to do is look at someone like Branson, who, quite happily, his big saying is who, not how. And I think it's
who, not how, yeah
it's
absolutely.
a really important thing. Yeah. So I've taken us around the mulberry bush a little bit here, mate. So I want to just come back to the well-worn path that I've mapped out for us because, or actually, no, that's not true. I haven't mapped out a well-worn path. I've got a few key things and themes I want to quiz you about and
no worries.
Put you on the hot seat with. You said the first thing you did was to really look at the tasks, and you said that you had to identify what are the things that I should be doing, what are the things I ought not to be doing, based on my own definition of success, right? And this is, I think, key. You've touched on it already. There's some people here who want to be totally hands-off in terms of clinical work. There's some that want to be more hands-on, and both are fine, right? There's nothing wrong with either.
Yes.
So depending on someone's definition of success, let's just say people listening to this podcast for a moment, they want to be able to wind back their clinical time, not get rid of it, just do it as much as they like. What would be the second step to do? So you've identified your task. You've thought, okay, am I going to give this to? Other than me, how do I take that next step?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, what I found that was the best thing there was to basically divide it into two sections.
Mm-hmm.
Identify the task was the first part, but then look at it and go, right, well, of those tasks, what is it that I like to do and want to do? And which are the ones that are the most beneficial to the business for me doing it?
So impact.
And I think that was huge because, and I teach this now to people, it's like there's a lot of types of clients that you may actually not want to work with, and that's just as important to identify that as it is to identify the people you want to work with.
Yeah, yeah.
And most people sit there around like marketing and they go, wow, actually, I don't want to deal with those type of people. They're the tire kickers, blah, blah, blah. And I go, great. So we need to change our marketing message and our targets and things like that to make sure that we're not getting those and we're separating those, because the people that want to work with those people, great, they can do that. But if that's not you, if that's not what gives you the most amount of pleasure, the most amount of benefit to your business and your career, your own personal and professional development, then let's avoid that.
Totally.
So I pretty much went, well, hang on a sec, there's two parts to this. It's like I want to do and work with these people or doing these tasks because I like it and I enjoy it and I want to be fulfilled in my workload each day.
Yep.
So I did that and I selected those.
Okay.
And then what I did was I went, well, hang on, which ones might I also look at saying they're really important, they need to get done, it's not really my thing, right? And that might be around, say, the financials or test and measure and that originally. And it's like they're important, they need to be done, not very good at them, I know they need to be done and blah, blah, blah. So at least I then identified the ones, there was 20 or 30% of my workload that I could drop off straight away.
Yeah, nice.
The ones that I didn't want to do, didn't like, and we, leverage those out, stop doing things, learn to say no.
Yeah.
And so we managed to kill that off. And literally, with no word of a lie, that I had two contractors working part-time with me when I had my young person stroke. They worked out, not me, in the days after that. I was working 90 to 92 hours on average, right? And I know within under 12 weeks, so in under 12 weeks of the day, under one quarter, I brought that back down to 62 hours.
Wow.
So, which is
still
huge,
a lot.
right?
It's a huge reduction. Still a big workload, though.
62 is massive,
right?
And I was down to 44 or 42 3 months after that. So I literally taken, in the 6 month period, more than a full-time workload out of myself.
Nice.
But in the first 12 weeks, I'd already taken 30 hours out of my workload.
Happy days.
Which that in itself is almost a full-time workload.
Yeah.
So, we just dropped off 30% of my workload straight off the bat of the stuff that didn't need to be happening, being a lot more selective with things, learning to say no, working the efficiency and effectiveness, systems, templates, all those type of things. But the big part that I did was once I got the tasks in place, I went, what do I want to do? What gives me most joy? And there was particular types of clientele that I loved working with. So I wanted to keep them.
Yeah, totally.
And I put those on the diary. And then the ones that had to be done, I put on. But then I also looked at the ones that had to be done that I didn't necessarily like.
Yeah.
And they're the ones I need to leverage. Who do I need? And, what systems, what technology, etc.
Yeah. So here's the thing that's going to come up for someone listening to this. They're going to go, Jace, that sounds awesome, but I'm really worried that if I pull that trigger, I'm going to not be busy enough, profitable enough. The impact on my business is going to be adverse, blah, 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 blah. Now, and I know that's not going to be the case.
Absolutely.
But I'm curious to understand what actually materialized in terms of results in your situation. What was the impact on your business by you cutting down your hours, from 92 to 60 to 40?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to say this, but I'm I'm really hesitant to say this, only because I'm probably a bit ashamed about it, to be totally honest. There was realizations in the weeks straight after that happened where I started to actually look back and reflect and go, you know what? Am I actually giving 100% to each of my clients?
Yeah.
Am I actually giving everything that I ethically and morally know I should be, that they are expecting? And there was a lot of times, Jesse, and this is the part that I'm ashamed about, there's a lot of times that I truthfully had to look at myself in the mirror and say no. And that hurts.
Yeah.
Like there's times where I would be maybe, I'm seeing some 2 or 3 clients in a gym-based environment, and I go to the gym and I'm seeing 2 or 3 clients, and 20 minutes apart or something like this, or overlapping and this and that. And I'd be doing something, and I can remember sitting on a machine or sitting next to someone while they're doing something and catching myself sort of with my eyes closed and going, oh. And I still remember, and again, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I still remember a time where a client went, "You okay? You're a bit tired, mate." And I did that whole, no, I've just got a bad headache. And that was literally like 2 days or 3 days before, my young person's stroke. And when you have to be honest with yourself in the days after that, and you sit there like, honestly, I'm ashamed of that, Jesse. Like that made me feel so low that I was working myself to the bone to the point where I'm not actually giving myself like what I signed up to make impact, to change people's lives, to do that. And I'm not giving everything to them.
Totally.
And so when you sit there and you go, well, hang on, all of a sudden I took all these hours away. I leveraged it out. I realized that, you know what? I can't be everything to everyone. And I'm not obviously the perfect fit for everyone. And so I empowered my team members, and I got into a scenario where I started seeing less people. I started actually getting sleep, like heaven forbid you get more than 4.5 or 5 hours sleep, like, whoa, crazy stuff, right? And so you actually realize immediately that if I'm getting 7 hours sleep, not 5 hours sleep, I'm actually switched on.
Yeah.
I'm actually thinking clearer. I'm giving more of myself. I'm getting better results. I'm getting better clinical outcomes. People are wanting to be around me more.
Yeah.
I'm not falling asleep driving along in the car. And you start to go, like, it doesn't take much, funnily enough, right?
No.
Like, I was obviously a slow learner. Very smart at school, but obviously my common sense disappeared at uni. That had nothing to do with girls and bars, okay?
Nothing. Nothing at all. Nothing to see here, folks. Move along.
No. Yeah. But it was one of those things that was probably the biggest thing. I very, very quickly, I remember told, follow the system and trust the process. And I did. And we dropped hours off. We said no to the non-targets that I didn't want, some of the tire kickers and a few things like that. And I created a little bit of space. And I learned very quickly, and I became good friends with Brad Sugars many years ago. And a lot of people know who Brad is, obviously. And I still remember Brad teaching me this story. And he said to me, he goes, "Jace, I like my cars," and he had a Lambo at the time and stuff like this. And he said, "How do you guarantee yourself that you're going to have 10 cars?" And I went, "Well, I don't know. What do you just buy 10 cars?" And he goes, "You build a 10-car garage." And I'm like, well, that's pretty stupid. But the whole thing is, the lesson in that is that life is a vacuum.
Yeah, you've got to create the space.
Got to create the space. And so he taught me that, and I sort of went, okay, and I'm going to trust the process, follow the system. And as a net result, you drop things off your diary. You create the space to put chaos time. You create some of your admin time or your management time. You create some marketing space. And those worries and that fear and anxiety that you spoke about maybe not seeing as many clients or the diary won't be as full, it actually does the opposite because you create a vacuum.
Yep.
And it's hard for people that might be listening to this, Jesse, to go, oh, well, and we like to dip below the line here and go, oh, yes, but.
Yeah, it'll work in your business, Jace, but definitely not mine. Or it'll work in Sydney, but not in Brisbane, or it'll work whatever, right?
Oh, or this old chestnut, ready? Oh, yes, but in my situation, it's different because.
Yeah. But $1 for every time, mate.
Oh, mate, absolutely. I'd be in the Bahamas with pina coladas.
Yeah.
So that's probably a big one. It's a matter of just, no. It's amazing how many people, when they just follow this, every single time it works out. You create that vacuum and you create the space, and all of a sudden we've got more people about the people that I'm wanting to see, spend time with. I'm getting better outcomes. I'm happier and healthier. Everything rolls forward money's there in abundance. And the great thing is it also creates a bit of scarcity. And you do this with your clients as well, Jesse, and talk about, you create that drive, that authenticity, that authority. And as a net result, you can put your prices up. So I found myself doing 3 price rises inside a 6-month period.
Oh, nice.
So I put my prices up going, and again, that was a big fear. I was like, oh, no, people will,
people will react. People will abuse me. What will they say? What will they think? They'll think I'm a rip-off merchant.
I'm only in it for the money and all this.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Gosh.
Selling snake oil and all these type of things. And I did it once, no one complained. And I actually had a few people on the very first day go, well, Jace, to be totally honest, you're too cheap before. And I'm like, oh, damn it. And then you do it again.
Why didn't you tell me?
No, yeah. It's like, thanks. It's like, if you liked me so much, why didn't you throw me an extra 20?
Yeah.
And so I did 3 price rises in 6 months. And so all of a sudden, I'm making a lot more profit. I'm making more money by seeing less people. And now all of a sudden, I'm in a situation where I'm doing all the right things, or the start of a lot of good things. And I'm loving life. I'm a lot happier and healthier. And, I'm starting to go, hang on, I can actually trust the process because I can see what it's actually done and what it is doing.
Yeah.
And that then led me to then open our own clinic and do our own standalone.
Yeah.
And as a net of doing that, I actually made an agreement with myself that the day we open, we would make sure that we were the most expensive clinic in the area.
Yep, nice.
Now, for an exercise physiologist, and I was the first EP in Australia to be employing physios, I brought in full-time physios, etc. We opened a standalone clinic, and we had 3 major physio clinics in our area that have been around for decades, and 2 of them were both on the same, technically the same street. One was just around the corner, but they were about 800 metres one direction and about 600 metres in the other direction.
Yeah.
And I didn't put any signs up because I went, I'm going to fly under the radar, open everything up, everyone knows and all this type of stuff, and everyone who needed to know and all this type of thing. And I put the right guarantees in place. We can talk about that later if you're wanting to.
Yep.
I made an agreement that I was going to be the most expensive. And I made ourselves $3 or $4 a consult more, and no one cared. No one complained. It created this mentality that these guys are the best. Like, they're the dearer ones. Like, you get more value with these guys and blah, 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 etc. And in under 10 months, we put one of them out of business, and a year and a half later, the other one went out of business, although she retired apparently.
Yeah. It's really interesting you say that, mate, about price, because I remember years ago, and by the way, I've walked a mile in your shoes, not so much with a young person's stroke. I didn't experience that, but I have experienced the effects of working too many hours clinically and trying to do everything. So in our first practice, I did that, and we ultimately sold that business because I didn't quite figure out the blueprint. I didn't quite figure it out. It was only when I sold that business and started a digital marketing agency, I went, oh, duh, if I'd known.
If only I knew.
If only I'd known, it's like another slow learner. But what was really interesting is back then I was dying under the workload, and I had this really good idea at the time. It seemed like a good idea, right?
I love it when you say it's a good idea and you're still laughing and trying to convince yourself to today.
Yeah. I said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to put our prices up, and that's going to thin out the crowd, and that'll bring my workload down so that I can manage it. Because in those days, there was a shortage of dentists that, trying to find another dentist to come and work for us was really hard. So I think I put our fees up something like 20%. Like, it was a big slug, right? And you know what came off the back of that?
More clients?
Yeah. I got busier. I totally shot myself in the foot. But the perception was, this guy's the most expensive. He's got to be the best. And, I like to think that we did great work. There's no doubt that we didn't. We certainly did good work. But were we clinically the best? I don't know. There are other people more talented than me, for sure.
Yeah.
So unlikely. But it was just the way it worked. And so, ladies and gents, if you've just tuned in, I'm having a conversation with Jason Pilgrim from profitablepractice.com.au, and he's sharing his journey from being overworked, stressed out, literally nearly dying under the workload, to creating a fully leveraged business which affords him money and time in abundance. So, mate, we've covered a bit of territory. I want to talk team for a minute because, you're really good at team, and you've got a couple of stellar team members. I know one of them very well, and he is, as we were talking off air, it's super top shelf dude. So, Scotty, if you're listening, g'day, mate. What I want to ask you about is, what did you learn about running a team that's made the difference?
Well, I might go back and say something similar to what I was saying before. I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned and that I still see a lot in allied health, medical, dentistry, etc., is the fact that we feel that we're the best person all the time. And, you mentioned Sir Richard Branson. He always says who, not how.
Yeah.
Super important, and he goes further into this, and you know that from the time you spent with him in NECA. And he talks about the fact that you've got to be able to hire and bring on team members. And I always say when people go, I've got 4 staff, and I go, great, sack the 4 staff members and get a team. And they go, what?
What's the difference?
Stop having staff and get a team, right?
Totally.
And he, like Sir Richard Branson always says that you have to look to hire team members that are better at that job than what you are.
Yeah. And
that was something that I just sort of fell into with, probably reading his books and things like that over the years, and just looked at things and went, well, hang on a sec. I need to have people that can basically do a better job than me. Now, I laugh about this a bit now and say I probably wasn't a good EP because I got other people that were better, but I know from what I did and where I was and how I grew and my reputation, all that type of stuff, I know I was bloody good at what I did, not being rude or arrogant, I was. But I also understood that if I was to be able to get people that clinically were fantastic, that were as good as me or better than me, then that becomes super powerful, because now all of a sudden we can actually grow ourselves as people, not just as practitioners.
Yeah. And
we can actually work with better relationships and rapport with clients, and obviously then get better outcomes. And you're always able to, be accountable to one another. You can actually help each other grow personally. And that's something I love doing. I love helping people grow personally, not just professionally. And I think I understood the value of having good, solid relationships. Like as a dentist, like if you get someone young that likes you and trusts you, they'll be your client for life. They'll bring in their husband or wife and their kids later and those type of things. So it becomes very, very powerful.
Yeah.
And so I think I don't really know the person or the time when this became evident, but I know there was a big mentality shift that I had that said, I need to grow the team, because if I can have a team that's clinically better than myself, then, hey, we can learn from each other, we can grow, we can upskill each other, we can stretch each other. And, one of my companies is called the Global Kaizen Group, because the word Kaizen is a Japanese proverb for continuous improvement.
Yep.
Increasing in efficiency, the elimination of waste, etc. And so I'm like, well, that's something that's always been a bit of a mantra and a word there that around. And if we can always continuously improve, we always see ourselves as an 8 out of 10, not a 10 out of 10. We've always got room to say something better, do something more, learn another skill, and we continually learn and upskill. And it creates a beautiful environment where we're always wanting to be able to do more and be more. And if I go back to, that's why I think, when we've come from sporting backgrounds or a bit of a competitive sporting background or things like that in our industry, we're driven to always go the extra mile and do that extra scenario. So if you create a culture and you create an environment of excellence where people just want to do more and be more. And I found myself also forcing myself to catch people doing the right thing.
Yeah, nice.
And I think Seth Godin, I learned that from him many years ago. And also Ken Blanchard and Spencer Johnson have the book, The 1 Minute Manager, probably the greatest management book ever written.
How good is that?
Yeah. And they talk about it in that book, that it's so much of this is about catching people doing the right thing. Like I talk to people now about that high five moment in the hallway. You walk along, you put your hand up as a practitioner's walking past, and they sort of, the first time you do it, they're like, why is this guy high-fiving me? And you just go, dude, you're doing an awesome job. That stuff you did yesterday with blah, blah, blah was amazing. Well done.
Yeah.
And then you walk off. And that 4 or 5 seconds, they just walk off just beaming. Like you turn around and watch them walk away, and they're standing an inch taller, their shoulders are back, their head's up.
Yep.
Because originally the mentality is the boss has just said, I'm awesome.
Yeah.
And you don't allow the word boss to be used, but it's just that positive, affirmation. It's getting your dopamine hits. It's using the right emotional intelligence and creating an avenue where we have a wins of the week board. So when we have our meetings every week, people are, right up on the little whiteboard when they've caught someone doing the right thing. So it creates this perfect avenue and a breeding ground where everyone just wants to bend over backwards for one another.
Yeah,
crawl over broken glass. And it's a beautiful thing. And I also learn a lot from Zappos, Tony Shea.
Yeah,
Zappos,
Tony Shea, delivering happiness, all that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brad, when I was over there on one of my many trips over there, quite a few years ago now, organised for us to go in and check it all out with Tony and the team over there. And we went in through Zappos and saw how they did it with their sleep room, because they were one of the first ones to do sleep rooms, and how they, Tony Shea, CEO of Zappos, is just out in the middle of the cubicles with everyone else and all this type of stuff. And rather than having, they catch people doing the right thing, and every team member is allocated $5 every week. So rather than $5 it's $5 the Zappo dollars.
Yep.
So it's like a $1 bill, but it's a Zappo dollar. And then they have, like Time Zone, you get the tickets and you get a prize covered.
Yeah.
Well, when you walk in, they've got this massive big case, and they might have iPads and all sorts of stuff in there.
That's fantastic.
And they literally, so you might have like this is back when iPhones were just coming out, and iPods, and you might have an iPod that's like $450. So you have to get 450 you're awesome type scenarios, and people every week can allocate their dollars. So if you go and help people, so people are going out of their way to create a culture of just give more, help more. And then when you stop and think about it, one of the greatest quotes ever from one of the men I love more than ever is Jim Rohn.
Oh, yeah, I was just listening to him in my car today, actually.
Yeah, he's awesome. And you can have anything you want in life if you just help enough other people get what they want.
Yeah.
And when you stop and think about it, I think it would have to be one of my 2 or 3 secrets of success. I have done so much for so many people over so many years. I just constantly give, and that's just bred from the people that you learn from. And like your Zappos scenario, you just see it. You constantly give, you constantly try and do things, help out, and it just breeds that same environment. And like attracts like.
Yeah.
And as a net result, when you do things for other people, they do it back. And I probably about 2 years ago, I can't remember who it was, but it was a colleague sat down and said, let's write a list of all the things that have come back to you because of your, the philanthropic and the generosity and the blah, blah, blah. And we started writing a list, and it was pretty epic. Like, I would not know how many zeros are in my bank account or, over the years because of what I've done. And that's then come back, reciprocity later and things like that. So I think with teams, it's just a matter of grow them personally, not professionally.
Yeah.
Don't just make it about money.
Mate, that's gold. That is absolute gold. So, ladies and gents, if you've just tuned in, we're talking to Jason Pilgrim, and he runs a business called profitablepractice.com.au, and he's shared his journey from being stressed out, burned out, literally, close to death from overwork to creating that leverage practice. Jace, you've shared a lot with us today, and your generosity really is limitless, and I want to say thank you to you on behalf of all of our listeners. Mate, one last question, and it's an interesting question I like to put to people from time to time. As we wrap up, if you were thinking about hosting a dinner party with 5 or 6 people that you'd like to have around the table, they can be alive or they can be dead, who would you invite?
How many am I allowed?
5 or 6, but
okay.
we're not hard and fast on numbers, mate. Man.
Okay, awesome. Because I hate questions like that. Well, who are the 3 people? And you go, oh.
Yeah, fast and loose, mate. It could be 2, could be 5. It doesn't matter.
I'd be saying someone like Sir Richard Branson. I just think his wisdom, but his down to earth side of things, I think would just be super powerful. Jim Rohn would definitely be up there for me as well. I think Bill Gates is someone as well that I think would learn a lot, but I would also have Jonathan McDonald I know very well, and he used to be the right-hand man for Bill that would go in and read body language and then tell Bill later what was actually said and done in meetings because not Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, because Steve was very one-directional and he knew what he wanted and he'd always get it, So I think putting those 2 together I think would actually work well. Nelson Mandela is another one I think would be very, 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 very interesting. Yeah, that's a pretty good list, mate, because there's some really good conversation that come out of that, mate. And I think good conversation promotes learning, promotes growth, promotes all of that stuff that we've spoken about today. And, mate, you shared very freely and openly, and I thank you for that. And thank you for opening up, mate, because it does take a lot of personal courage to share a lot of that stuff. And I can see that it's had a deep impact on you, your life, your business, and so on, mate. So thank you for being so raw and open with us. From all of us here at Savvy Dentist, mate, I salute you. May your good work continue. And, mate, looking forward to catching up with you for a beer soon. Absolutely, mate. Hey, thank you very much. And hopefully what I've sort of said today will spark something. Like so many people have helped me out over the years. And if it can help a few other people, achieve some change that, leads them to greater success, then I'll be very, very grateful for that. So
perfect. Thanks, mate.
Thanks for your time. Cheers.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green. For more free tools and resources, join the free Facebook group. Visit drjessiegreen.com/Facebook. And for more episodes, visit drjessiegreen.com/savvydentist.